From the Oklahoman newsroom, it's time for the Red Zone, our weekly extended look at Oklahoma football. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell, OU beat writer Ryan Aber. Guys, another early kickoff on Saturday for the Sooners at home. It's a noon start against UCLA. A more marquee game in name, Ryan, but I'm not real sure that the Bruins are all that much better than what we saw a week ago with the Florida Atlantic team.
Well, I think they're better in that they have better depth, better talent across the board. Florida Atlantic had elite players, like we talked about, at a couple positions. You talk about quarterback and running back and linebacker. They didn't have the overall recruiting that you need to compete at a high level. UCLA has that. They just haven't had much success with it lately, and a really rough start to the Chip Kelly era a week ago when UCLA fell to Cincinnati in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, and Barry, I mean, they look good. They look the part of a pretty good Power 5 team, but then the game starts, and they've clearly got deficiencies, maybe most of all in the passing game, which is difficult when Chip Kelly's your coach.
Yeah, and they got quarterback problems. Wilton Spate, the guy they started against Cincinnati, got hurt. They're going to go with the freshman. It's just a bad time for UCLA. There's a reason the job came open. They fired Jim Moore because they weren't winning enough. The talent is much better than Florida Atlantic, but it's still down by UCLA standards. Chip Kelly's rebuilding. They're going to come in here pretty much overmatched, and this is a game. When it was scheduled, you think, hey, interesting game. Mm-hmm. Probably not so much when it actually kicks off.
Maybe the game next year in the Rose Bowl will be the interesting one, but right now, not so much.
Well, that's an interesting side note, guys, because there is a challenge in scheduling these games. Joe Castiglione has sort of made some hay with these, big marquee matchups, and a Nebraska matchup coming here not too long down the road, and some other non-conference matchups that look really juicy. And at the time, you think, ooh, that'll be fun, but you just never know, Barry. And you actually had a chance to talk to Joe a little bit about the cost of scheduling some of these games. It's a tricky dance when you're talking about the payouts and trying to get teams on your schedule that will help you down the road with the college football selection.
Yeah, Sooners have, I don't know if it's lucky or unlucky, but Ohio State, they caught Ohio State in the wheelhouse. The Buckeyes were big time good. But when they played Florida State a few years ago, they got the Seminoles right before Jimbo Fisher got the Florida State back to an elite level. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame and Tennessee was down. Notre Dame was up. So you just never know. So they've caught UCLA in a down cycle, and good for the Sooners. It's probably going to mean an easy victory. But we thought that OU had put together a pretty interesting schedule with Florida Atlantic, Army, and UCLA. Yeah. Well, Florida Atlantic was not what they were billed. Army didn't score in the first half against Duke. This schedule might prove to be easier than what at first thought.
Ryan, one of the things that we thought UCLA might do in this game against Oklahoma is test the secondary. And they may still test the secondary more than Florida Atlantic ultimately did, but that seems like a spot where it's not going to be what it could have been, and we really haven't seen the Sooners get tested there yet.
Yeah, and that might be a bit concerning entering next week's Big 12 opener against Iowa State, a team that certainly will test them deep, but UCLA looks like they're going to start a freshman quarterback, and so those new players on the back end, you talk about guys like Buki Radley-Hiles, Justin Broyles, the young guys that played last year, Trey Norwood and Trey Brown, might not get tested very much entering Big 12 play, and that's something I imagine Lincoln Riley's got to be at least a little bit concerned about.
Well, Barry, what you saw of the secondary against Florida Atlantic, how would you grade out that group?
I thought they played pretty well, and I thought they covered pretty good. There weren't a lot of owls running free. In years past, there have been. We saw improvement in this secondary the latter part of last season. So with Motley and the two Treys, Brown and Norwood, taking over at cornerback. So I think there was reason for optimism. Radley-Hiles makes a huge difference. So I'm optimistic about this group, and just in general. The defense just looked bigger, stronger, faster, and maybe the recruiting has picked up. Doesn't hurt when you add guys like Radley-Hiles and Ronnie Perkins. They can change the complexion of a defense.
Definitely so. Let's stick with this defensive theme for a second, guys. Ryan, a position that we thought was looking pretty good suddenly looks pretty thin, that being that hybrid defensive end linebacker spot. Sooners like to call it the jack linebacker. I don't know if anybody knows what that means beyond the walls of the building down there.
The other ones are all easy, like they call it the Mike linebacker, it's the middle linebacker. Sam, strong side. Will, weak side. Jack has no connotation in that way, so it's a little more difficult to describe.
I'm going to call it the Eric Stryker Memorial spot, or the Obo Okoronkwo. It's kind of that freelance almost position that I don't know if they're giving that guy as much leeway as those two. But that's a spot that has suddenly got thin, most recently with the transfer of Addison Gums. I mean, some serious depth issues right there, Ryan.
Yeah, they felt pretty good about that spot going into preseason camp, where they had Jalen Redmond, the freshman from Midwest City, who they thought was going to play a lot right out of the gate. Turns out he has a blood clot issue and is out for the entire season. They thought Addison Gums would be a guy who would play a lot as well, probably those two competing for a starting spot. Well, Gums gets hurt the day before their opener against Florida Atlantic, and then a few days later announces that he's going to transfer. I think there was some stuff bubbling up before that. But now you pretty much just got Mark Jackson, who has been okay when he's played, but hasn't played a ton and sort of been disappointing in relation to his recruiting rankings and what he was expected to be. And then you've got John Michael Terry as his backup, and Terry's been playing the position for all of about 5 minutes. Lincoln Riley and Mike Stoops both said that they would have to consider whether to move some other players around. I think the one that would make the most sense would be Caleb Kelly, who's not starting, as Curtis Bolton has taken that spot after moving him around during the offseason. I think Kelly might be able to find a role there, but the long and short of it is they're not going to use that position a ton this year. When a linebacker goes off the field in favor of a fifth DB, it's probably going to be that linebacker who comes off rather than we've seen at other times it be the weak side guy.
Barry, considering that they had two what they thought were going to be dynamic playmakers battling for that position, and now they're left without both of them, does this put pressure more on Kenneth Murray, Curtis Bolton, whoever you want to name? I memean, does that change it in the fact that there's not going to be that Obo type of player out there, that Eric Stryker type of player out there?
Well, I think it puts the pressure on Mike Stoops, because he's really got to change his defensive structure and what he wants to do. Ryan talks about how they're probably not, when they go to 5 DBs, that's the guy that probably comes off the field. So what's going to happen is the Sooners are going to rush 3 and blitz on occasion, and that blitz, in the old days, we knew where it was coming from. It's coming from Obo. It's coming from Eric Stryker. Now it's going to have to come from somebody else, different positions. In a way, that it gives OU a more of a surprise attack notion. You just don't have guys that can get there as good, unless Caleb Kelly pans out. I thought that would be a natural move. As soon as I saw that he wasn't, potentially going to start, I thought maybe he could do that. I don't know if he's as fast as those two guys. Those guys were just so quick off the ball, getting around the end. That's a specific skill. There's a reason there's not a lot of guys like that. So they're hard to find. But Sooners are just going to have to find other ways to rush the passer.
All right, guys, we've spent almost 10 minutes talking about the Sooner defense. We haven't even mentioned all the points that the offense put up, guys. And I suspect that, while Cincinnati scored enough to beat UCLA last Saturday, there's a good chance the Sooners are going to be able to score even more on the Bruins. We saw, Ryan, just a ton of different guys getting involved, with Kyler Murray taking over as the starter, the full-time starter for the first time. What most impressed you about what you saw? I know Florida Atlantic proved not to be a great challenge, but what did you see specifically that you were most impressed by offensively?
Well, I think the control that Kyler Murray showed of this offense, that he didn't make mistakes, he wasn't making bad throws, he was running when it made sense, but not just running to show off his speed. Played really, really under control, and I thought that that's exactly what Oklahoma's offense needs as a transition from Baker Mayfield to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray makes plays. I mean, we saw that with the 15-yard scramble that we wrote so much about early in the week. We saw that with the throws that he made, 2 65-yard touchdown passes, including a great catch and run by Lee Morris. But I thought the control that Kyler Murray showed was what was most impressive.
Barry, what most stands out to you?
I liked the accuracy of both quarterbacks, Austin Kendall before he got hurt and Kyler Murray before he went out. They combined went 17 of 21. Each had 2 incompletions. Kendall's 2 incompletions were throwaways when the pressure was coming and he had to unload the ball. So I was very impressed with the accuracy. The guys who run around and make plays are great. Baker Mayfield was fabulous at that. But the thing that made Mayfield great, the number one reason, was he put the ball right on target. And Kyler Murray did that against Florida Atlantic. It'll get more difficult to do that, but I like the way he delivered the ball. If the Sooners can get accurate passing, then that offense is going to be very difficult to stop.
The big plays that we saw, I mean, you mentioned 65-yard passes, and just 65 was wild. There were 3 of them, weren't there, guys?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. 3 65-yard touchdowns for the Sooners. And then you had the punt block, which, we probably won't have a chance to talk much about. But the big playability of this offense, it may be on display again against UCLA. Can they sustain it, Ryan, moving ahead, though? Is that the kind of thing that you feel like this offense could become known for down the road?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about it, because when you've got a receiver like Marquise Brown, then you're going to be able to do things like that as long as you've got a guy who can get it to him. And we've seen that with Kyler Murray last week. I mean, the 65-yard touchdown pass to Brown was just a throw it up and have Marquise Brown run underneath it. The Morris one was much more of a catch-and-run situation. But when you've got him, you've got CeeDee Lamb, you've got Rodney Anderson who can break those long runs. I think this is the first of a series of really long scoring plays that we're going to see out of this offense.
You mentioned CeeDee Lamb and Barry. I think you and I might have had the same thought watching that opener. They didn't throw it a ton to CeeDee Lamb. I mean, for all the big plays, maybe the guy at receiver that you could see being most dynamic. I know Marquise Brown. I know he's very dynamic, but CeeDee Lamb's got the build, he's got the speed, he's got the hands, and they didn't throw it to him a ton, and yet they still did what they did.
Yeah, and that's a very good sign. I assume they're going to throw it to CeeDee Lamb. I personally think he's the best player on the team, he or Rodney Anderson, but he's an unbelievable talent. Brown going deep is going to draw a lot of attention now. People know that they can get the ball to him. So I think that's going to be a weapon sort of underutilized against Florida Atlantic, but they're going to use CeeDee Lamb. He's just too good not to get more than 2 or 3 looks a game.
Yeah, and I think especially when you look at they're going to add Charleston Rambo to the offense this week. We've heard a lot about him. They're going to be able to spread the ball out more, and with, like you said, the attention going to Marquise Brown, that's going to open things up underneath. And I'm really interested to see who some of those other options are. Whether it be Charleston Rambo, we saw what Lee Morris can do last week. Is Carson Meyer, somebody like that, going to be involved in the passing game as well?
Yeah, Grant Calcaterra and Carson Meyer, 2 guys I'm curious to see how they emerge, because they're at those positions. Mark Andrews, Dimitri Flowers held last year as sort of safety valve guys. Are they going to become that as the season goes on? Something to watch for sure. Okay, guys, before we get out of here, we need to talk about predictions. You 2 are at the top of our staff predictions, so we know that whatever you've picked is going to be spot on. Ryan, as it relates to OU, you've got them winning 45-14. Tell us about your pick.
Well, I think that Oklahoma's going to score a lot. I think we talked about their offense and why they're going to continue to be dynamic, continue to put a lot of points on the board. I look for that offense to keep right on rolling. And UCLA, with a quarterback who's a freshman, making his first career start, I think guys like Ronnie Perkins, guys like Kenneth Mann, Amani Bledsoe are going to be able to make life difficult on them. I don't think Oklahoma's going to be tested much on the back end, but some of those young defensive linemen are going to really get after it.
Barry, you nearly had a similar score to what Ryan had, just went a little less for the Sooners at 42-14.
Yeah, I screwed up. I should have said 49-14. 1986, UCLA comes here, gets beat 38-3. 2003, they come here, get beat 59-24. It's a clear pattern of behavior. They lose by 35. So I should have said 49-14. It sort of shows bad luck for the Bruins. They always come here when the Sooners have an epic team. 86 was an outstanding team. 03 was played for the national title. Bruins not getting any luck on the scheduling of the Sooners.
Are you predicting something even bigger about this OU team, perhaps?
We'll see.
Okay, no prediction yet on that, folks. But our picks are in the Thursday paper, so we want to check that out and see what these guys have to say about not only that game but others. And be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.